Hello, guys. I'm not sure if you guys are allowed to have audio, but if you are,
Hey,
hi.
Tieran.
Ah, hey, Adam.
How's it going?
Okay, so great, great, great. Okay, you guys have audio, great. Okay, I have everybody's. You guys can see my screen, right? Hope so.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna open chat. I'm gonna open chat here. Okay, so I have chat open. I have your guys' screen here. And we don't have that much time, and I have a lot of artworks to go through. So I'm pretty much gonna like lightning round these critiques. And if I'm talking about your piece, feel free to hop in with questions, text, or it'd be better to just like Adam, just jump in with voice chat, but with your voice. But let's get into it. So I have one hand because I started there and I saw one. Okay, so very quickly with the hand, I just think when we're drawing, we want to emphasize the contours here. So, for example, here we can just push the front of the hand here, bringing out the the ridges that the hands have. So, I don't know whose this is, but for everybody who's doing these hands, you want to emphasize that there's a dip in the middle of this hand here, and you do that by just emphasizing this front ridge, right? So, aside from that, this is good. We like the construction. I'd go for cleaner lines with this, right? But I can see that this is drawn quite small. When you're doing your hands, you want to scale up a little bit and do your best to just emphasize the form. So we got layouts here. So with layouts, we want to always be thinking about the fact that every layout we're doing is going to be in the show in an animation. It's going to serve as the background for characters to interact. So in your layout, you need to think, what is the space that the characters would stay in? So for example, it'd be here, right? This is where we'd probably see two characters talking. So whoever made this, you thought of that, and that's great. However, you also want to make sure you're maintaining a consistency with the space because the characters have to stay here. We need to be aware of how much space we're leaving for certain objects here, right? So that would mean I think we should probably take this and just give them a bit more space away from the chair so that it's more believable that the character could fit in this space, right? See, now there's some leg room, right? Aside from that, I like all this. Foreground elements are nice, perspective feels believable. Just leave some space for the actual actions to happen. Similar thing here is we want room for the midground to breathe, right? Right now, it feels like we don't have a very strong floor plane for the midground, right? So I think what we could do is just push and pull the foreground elements to have the eyes know that they're supposed to stay in the midground. So by opening this space up here, you can see how we give we let the audience know where they're supposed to be looking. Makes sense, thank you. Awesome. See, by
Um,
doing this, yep,
oh, sorry, I drew this one. I did want to ask,
yep.
should we draw on 2 point or is 1 point all right to draw?
1 point's all right. The thing you should be thinking about is where is the focal point and how is that best achieved? In your case, the focal point's right here. 1 point's perfect. 1 point's fine for this, right? Especially in a natural setting, it's pretty, it doesn't really matter because nature and like organic things don't really conform to angles like an office would. But it's about making sure that so you have leading lines like this, you have objects that lead the eye, and that's what's more important rather than 1 point or 2 point. It's about going, well, if this is the focal point, how can I, and you can do something like a big leaf like this in the foreground, right? Lead the eye to objects over here, right?
Thank you so
So
much.
no problem. So yeah, opening up the midground a little bit, just so the audience knows that this is where the characters interact. And if you want to, you could have a stronger push with the story by having another character maybe here, or just to define what's happening in the middle here. It looks like this person's very spiritual or peaceful. They could have another person sort of sitting with them, sort of like if you've seen Bobby Chu's drawings, he has something similar to that. Anywho, okay, here I see this as a common thing. Remember, earlier we're talking about the focal point, right? Here we have the character is the focal point, so the space around them is relatively undisturbed so that we can, by contrast, see them. We need that here. We need the space around the focal point to be undisturbed. That means letting this character have breathing room, right? So you take these elements and then you move them to give room to this character. Because if this character is what's important to the scene, we don't want to block them off, right? So you would do that by just, I'd say, reframing a little bit, where you bring out the character to have their entire, let me switch my brush here, to have them in their entirety depicted, right? And then the trees could still be in the foreground, but you don't want to cut off the character, right? So that'd be the character, like there, instead of being blocked. Okay. Yeah, aside from that, I think this is good. Just want to bring this character out. So here, so this is the same artist. Here, I think we could remove this because once again, it's about the focal point. If this is the focus of the piece, you see how this sort of gets in the way without serving a purpose. And it's good to have a foreground element, but then I'd recommend having something like having a foreground element that leads the eye instead of having one that disrupts the flow of the piece, right? You could add boxes and it could be that they're moving in, right? So by adding boxes, and you could add boxes going up too to establish a sense of depth, right? To show that this space is really 3D. But you see by adding stuff like this, we can lead the eye to the focal point, which is here, rather than having it right here. It's just sort of a mask that gets in the way, right? So little things like this will help to inform the depth. And just based on the perspective here, I'd venture to guess that our horizon line is around, let's see, so we have our line here, right? Let's say what I'm trying to get at is that I think this shelf could be, we could be seeing the top of this shelf like that. I think we could be seeing the top of this shelf. And then this box could be relatively flat. Because it looks to me like the horizon line's right about here. And you probably should make it right about eye level anyway. So this is probably where we'd want the horizon line. So we would want to see the top of this shelf. Yeah. Okay, so here, well, I've seen an iteration of this one before. Okay, so here's another common mistake is foreground elements that don't tell the audience where the ground plane is, and in fact they suggest a different ground plane than what we see. For example, what we're seeing here is that the ground plane is like this, let's say. It's low. And then we see a mushroom like this, and we're seeing the top of it. And from what we understand, the mushrooms are relatively small, but all of a sudden this mushroom is so big that it's filling the frame. And it's not cohesive with the ground plane that we see here, right? So we want to make sure, and what we do is just make this mushroom smaller. We sort of make a bunch of mushrooms, and the ones closer to the frame would be like this, right? Because it just doesn't make sense. They would be the same size as the mushrooms here, if not slightly bigger. But you see how the previous mushroom is just far too big, that it makes the viewer have to do the mental work to think, oh, it must be the ground must be rising and the ground must be right here, but it's just out of frame. It's sort of awkward, right? So just make those smaller and have them fit the shape language of these mushrooms. Another thing here is that we have our skull, right? And now this is because you're depicting it as a human skull, you're suggesting qualities of the volume because you're likening it to things that uh, we know what they should look like. What that means is we have this skull, and we know that this is a three-quarter skull, just like a three-quarter face, right? Therefore, the water springing out should be following the contours like this. See, the water should be flowing along and down, like out and down, rather than as it is right now, it's sort of a flat sticker of water, you see? So we just want to wrap it around to emphasize the form of this skull. Same thing here. We could use like form language to show the blocky nature of the skull, right? You could have your lines here wrap around and then go against the perspective that way, right? Aside from that, good focal point and good composition overall. Just the foreground and then the uh, volume mapping of the skull. Here, I didn't have many critiques. I wanted to include it, but I like the composition. I'd say make sure that you have a good sense of what the ground plane is, right? And then, yeah, keep going. This looks great. But that's sort of how, yeah. Yeah, looks great. Clear focal point, really nice. Here too, I would say that this tiger could be moved up a little bit slightly, just like this, because yes, these are really great. Um, all of these have been really nice. Yeah, what I'm noticing is that the composition feels a little, things are clashing a little bit. So this door is right in the way of the chair, so is this rug, and I want to find ways we can separate these a little bit. So what I see is like we can have this chair, right? We can move the rug a little bit up, and then we can move the door a little bit back too. And you see how this just gives the composition a little bit more, it clashes a little bit less. So because areas where there's a lot of clashing will draw the viewer's eye if it looks like a little awkward. But yeah, this is good. This will be your subject and focal point right here. That's great. And I'd say have some leading lines go that way. So build your environment to support items going that way, right? So just having things that sort of lead the viewer's eye there going here, right? We don't need to clutter our layouts. We just need to pick what's important, and the other elements will just reinforce that area of importance. So here, I remember whoever submitted this asked if they should continue with it or not. I think this was great. I think this is really nice. We just want to do a couple things here to just balance the composition a little bit more. If this is the focal point, I think we can sort of move this a little bit out of the way or have it in line with the perspective. And from what it looks like, this would sort of be a wall right here if this is in line, if these are even. So there'd be a wall here, and you would just have your character sleeping, except the scaling for the chair. You want to make sure this chair and this chair are relatively the same because we're not zoomed in that much further when we're here, right? Aside from that, the composition is pretty nice, pretty strong. Yeah. Here, really nice, strong story. This is one of those, I think my critique here is simplify what doesn't need to, what the viewer doesn't need to focus on because you have a lot going on. And right now, the focal points are getting a little bit lost in the detail of the complementary items in the frame, and you want so you see how like the octopus has uh, tentacles have a lot of detail, but the body has very little detail, whereas the pipes have a lot of detail and they're thicker line work. So you want to pick a focal point and have your surrounding lines be a bit less concrete. Now that what that would look like is just going through your piece, and so I'll pick a white as an eraser, and we'll just so what you could do is go over your line work, and like where we have this base, you could just go over this and just lighten up the line work, right? To show that this is not what's important. This is set dressing, but we don't want the viewer to be looking at this. So we can literally just be like, nah, this is less important. Now it works on the glass. I wouldn't recommend doing it this with the pipes. With the pipes, I just reduce the amount of details, right? Just erase them. You don't need the viewer to be seeing the pipes. And I'd say pick one focal point. Either pick the focus to be, oops, either pick the focus to be here or pick it to be here. Right now you have two clashing. You have leading lines leading here, right? But then you have a lot of details happening here. So you want to pick one and then erase detail from the other. Here. Very nice story here. Uh, I think what we could do is push the dynamism a little bit. So you see, you get this sense that this wave is coming towards the viewer, towards the protagonist. The protagonist is going away. But we want to keep that dynamic element even in the background. And you see how the background is sort of just a flat line here. I want you to enforce this motion coming towards the viewer by having the geography complement that. So you could just have some sort of dynamic geography here, right? So instead of having a flat riverbank, you have one that comes towards you or something like this. So the riverbank could extend outward here like this, coming towards the viewer as well. And you could have trees or grass extending as well, coming this way. The bones could even, so your composition right now is very bottom heavy. See how like all of the important elements are down here and very few are up here. You could, why not have the bones pile up like this? In effect, they could be on this side too. With a lot of the portfolio, it's about what's your idea and how much can you just crank it up until it's borderline, like it's too exaggerated. Like if this is a deadly island, we can literally just have a bunch of, so you can pile up these skulls. And then on top of that, your trees sort of are pasted to the background. We could bring the trees into the foreground. If you don't want to pile up the skulls, you could have a tree in the foreground like this. You could have another tree here, right? You could have them tangle together to provide a sense of depth in the jungle, right? Connect to the background, right? So they're tangling and it's just giving this greater sense of depth as opposed to having it flat against the background. Yeah. Here, this interior, it's more perspective. I like the story. The story is very clear. Again, so we've seen this before, a box in the foreground that, remember, this is the acting space for the viewers, for the protagonists in the scene. We need to make sure that the acting space is cleared. So we don't want elements like this blocking it. We want to frame it, right? You'd want to put boxes like this, right? But where we can, we'd want to not disrupt we don't want to disturb the composition as it is, right? So if we just fill this back up, see, by doing this, I'm looking at dark value somehow. Okay. Well, Um, okay, so imagine the composition is more like this, right? We leave the foreground empty so the viewer knows that this is where the action is going to happen. But so the major perspective issue here is that your horizon line somewhere around here, right? Maybe around here. We need to make sure that everything follows that. You see how so these lines follow that, but this bookshelf doesn't. Bookshelf needs to be like this, right? These shelves need to be tilting downward, right? Following that perspective. In fact, this cat would be lower actually. You see the line? This cat would be like down here, right? Like that. Okay. Okay, now we get into the storyboards. And then well, I just went in order of what I saw. Remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to just shout them out. Okay, so with these storyboards, I want to emphasize, and this is the first year we're doing them. All I'm going off of is having talked to the storyboard teachers and asked what they're looking for. And based on the classes I've had, there's a distinct difference between beat boards and storyboards. The beat board, which is the 4-panel one, is an exercise in how well can you structure a story. And imagine each beat is like a 30-second to a minute sequence. So if we see a beat like this, it's like something happens, and then another entire different thing happens, and another entire different thing happens, another entire different thing happens to make a story. What the storyboard is designed to do is to go, how do we get from beat one to beat two? It's not supposed to be a grand story. And I think a mistake I'm seeing is students are taking the beat board and making in their storyboard is just a beat board that's 3 times bigger. And I think why they want a storyboard and a beat board is the storyboard is to show how you can understand how to direct the viewer's attention from second to second, right? Thinking about they want to see if the student can think about how best to transition a scene or how best to show a piece of information and then show a character react. It's not necessarily about telling a whole story. So with a lot of these storyboards, my critique is going to be the same, is that the story is too large scale and the story takes precedent over the visual telling of it, right? A lot of it's plot based when it's not about the plot. It's about uh, the way you're conveying emotion. If you look at the prompt, it's like intentionally vague. Fundamentally, like motivation is fundamentally prompted by desire or something. What that is essentially saying is emotion causes action. And that's what when you break down like a movie or a scene, everything that happens in a movie is a back and forth between emotion and action. Character learns a piece of information, character does something with that information, that thing causes some other character to feel a certain way. So that character, and that's the plot of a movie, but that's also the plot of an act, and that's also how a scene goes, and that's also how a conversation goes. It's always emotion, action, emotion, action. So, point is, it's about the minutia. So, when I see this, my first thing I do is see if I can understand the story without words. So I don't look at the words. Um, and that's a rule of thumb is that we're in animation, not film. So you should try to tell a story that doesn't require words. And it goes, especially if you look at the script, if you look at the guidelines, it says include dialogue or action notes if necessary. So it's not a requirement at all. In fact, I would say more often than not, it leads applicants down the wrong path because they start judging their story based in relation to to the text they wrote when you don't want to rely at all on text. So for a story like this, I'd look at this and another thing is that a general rule of thumb is you don't want to include a story that is reliant on visual text as well. It happens in movies, but it's generally not the strongest way to deliver a story. And I'm not just gonna give critique. I'm gonna give what I'd recommend. Because there's always, the thing is, anytime you show text, there's always another way to do it. For example, I was talking to a student about showing a cookbook. You could show a cookbook in an animation, and you can look at how like Ratatouille might do it, right? In a cookbook, you can just write tomato, tomatoes, or tomato soup, right? And then you could show cook bowl, you could write it down, but then the audience is watching a movie, reading a book. Instead, you can just draw a tomato, right? Like you can draw a tomato. There's always ways around it. So instead of showing something that the audience has to read, show it. I mean, it's the age-old rule, show, don't tell, right? So we have a character texting their long distance partner and they're going to sleep and then they surprise their partner. I already looked at this. So my what I do is instead of showing that they're like they love each other over text, have them on a call, right? Have them calling each other and be clearly smitten by one another with the little like maybe the feet are up or something. Like they're like they're super happy to be talking on call, right? They're calling each other and then there can be like I don't know, you can show. So this is just one of those examples of instead of having the audience have to read dialogue to get the story, just show them the story, right? We don't like books. We don't like books over here. So yeah, so this is one example. You can just show them on a call. And I would say that you don't necessarily have to show them going to sleep. You could literally just show them um, planning something surprising or having an idea of like, Hmm. Having an idea, like having a mischievous idea, and then you can show them at the airport. But overall, if possible, I'd always recommend a smaller scale story rather than because this story literally spans countries and days. So if possible, dial it down. But yeah, show don't tell at the very least. Other than that, I think this is all great. Yeah, and everything else. The only thing I change is the show a call instead of showing text. It helps the audience know exactly. Firstly, it helps them know who this person is at the end. You haven't shown that person yet, meaning we don't know who this tiger is. But if you show them on a call with Tiger, they will know that it's Tiger they're visiting. Okay. So this is an example of the scale of story that I think is a bit better suited for the storyboard, which is the thing is these were all beats. Every one of these is a story beat. It goes uh, the character is calling, then they sleep, then they go to the airport, then they're on the plane, then they go off, then they knock on the door. Then so it's each a beat, but this one's a bit smaller scale. This one takes place maybe over the span of like 5 minutes. So the character and their dad are at the beach, the character's bored. So what I'd recommend here is you don't need in a storyboard, you don't need to repeat the same information twice. So the information is these people are playing volleyball. But playing volleyball is only relevant because the kid is bored at the beach. And playing volleyball is still in the second panel. So what I do is awesome. Okay, what I do is take away playing volleyball as the focus here and instead make the focus kid is bored at the beach, right? If the kid is bored at the beach first, playing volleyball makes sense intuitively. Right? So show that the kid is bored at the beach and show that the sandcastle. So I'd say just sort of tilt the camera down a little bit to be more of a focus on the sandcastle. And he could be crumbling as a metaphor for his crumbling trust in his dad or something. I don't know. And then the dad's like, you could have the dad look at the kid like, right? And the kid's like, hmm. The kid could be in the foreground more. The kid could be like, he's bored, right? And the dad's like, dang, same thing. And now people could be playing in the beach, but that's not the focus, is my point. Now in the second panel, you don't need to show volleyball playing here because this already makes sense. Oh, the kid's bored, people are playing a game, dad has an idea, drags his kid out, bang, bang, this is great, this is great. Um, the spike happens. I'd say what you could do is probably So you have a dynamic angle here, but this is sort of blocking. I think what you could do is show like this, or show like tilt it more so that the hand is like this and the face is like ah, and maybe the hand is out reaching out like this to literally target the kid like this. Right? Very dynamic angle, but I mean, this is the hand, hands out like that. See, we could, instead of, because this sort of blocks the frame quite a lot right now, and you could literally just have it like this, and it serves the same purpose, but it shows the dad in a bit better framing, shows the action a little bit better, right? He's like, no, don't assault my kid, and then he gets hit. It also follows through the, so if you see the, like, this is the line of action we're following. In the next frame, it goes from up here to down here. It's great. Um, hey, I say make the impact frame. Have it like, bam. Really nail the shot right there. That's the gag, right? So we can hit that. It also follows through on the line of action we're going through in the previous frame. Um, So that's sort of what the storyboard's about, is leading the focal points of the eye, right? That's why they want to see a specific storyboard as opposed to a beat board. It's not about the story anymore. Even though, so they kind of they don't make it easy because they call it a storyboard, but they care less about the story and more about the actual like beats in this regard. But it's always been a rather confusing section. But this is great. The dad still catches the ball. He's trying to continue the volley, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, he fails. And then he sees his son. This is all great. I think this is good. But yeah, just those few things. So this one, yes, this is good. This one, should the storyboard still have a 3x structure at least, or just between beats? So this 3x structure, I literally would say that all your story needs is a context and then a sort of a but and then a therefore. So I demonstrated one in my like storyboarding talk, as simple as like person is hungry, so instead of we don't need a therefore. We'd have a context, so, and then a but, or a context and but and therefore, same thing. So I had character is hungry, so they go get food, but there's no food in the fridge. It's like three act structure as in beginning, middle, and end. But you don't need this like deep conflict. You don't need this. Really, you just need desire and action. That's it, right? Like the prompt is intentionally vague. No problem. So, Adam, this is great. The one thing I'd say here, great story. This is an example of the story beats are relatively mild. It's not this end of the world. It's literally car pulls up, it needs a tire. Oh, okay. In saying this, I realized something. You might want to, hmm, this might be tough. We kind of need to know, okay, here we know that the car is missing a tire. I wonder, and I don't think it destroys the story, but I do wonder if there's a earlier way to show that this car is in need of a tire, because that right now, this action is not in context to a need. You're, we don't see from this angle that this, so if we don't see from this angle that the car needs a tire. We could go, okay, the tire is needed here, but that would mean that this shot doesn't work as well because it's on the other side. So it's something to think about. It didn't ruin the story, but something to think about. The only thing I would add to this story right now is you have the character here, you have the character here. Here, have the character spring to action here so that we can understand we're still in the same place. The only thing I thought when I first saw this story is I thought that this was a new location. I thought he came around the corner and just out of like instinct, because it's not immediately evident, well, partly because this character is no longer in frame, I think. So if we can have just this character maybe start preparing to go to the car, it just makes it very clear that we just moved up, not we're in a new location. But yeah, this like wheel, we don't necessarily know that they need a wheel yet, but I think that's also part of the gag of we don't know what the issue is. We pan to this character and we're like, what's the issue? What's he solving? I think overall this is really strong. Just have this continuity here. That's the only thing that pulled me out of this story.
Sweet.
Here too, I think this is good. You don't see it very much, but taking a little frame, an actual frame of rest for the gag. Oh, I was thinking here you could have this race car character be like, oh, just to push the anticipation, just to push the gag. He's shocked, raising that like, what is happening? And then he gets in the car and there's the yeah, you could just push that suspense. Great gag. So this is an example of the story beat is beginning, middle, end. It's not super like maybe smoke coming out of the missing tire. Yeah, that's a possibility, except we don't necessarily want to block, right? We could definitely you could show the car a bit more dinged up on this side, I think. Just to show, yeah, maybe smoke coming off like this. Yeah, something like this, just to show that the car is in a little bit of a hazardous state. Just so, because on this side, it sort of looks like the car's pretty fine. And then we see that it's broken on this side. So yeah, it's a couple things. I don't think it's priority like A. The only thing is continuity here, but yeah,
Okay. I had like
overall.
an extra frame for
Mm,
it was like an over the shoulder. It would have been the third like jammed in between the second and third frames.
mm,
It would have been like an over the shoulder of like the two character between the two characters looking at like the wheel. But I feel like it breaks 180-degree rule, but
mm.
it would show that damage.
I wonder
Um,
if you could. I don't think it's. I think the story as it is works
mm,
as long as you have this character. That was the only time I was pulled out of the story, just because I'm like, oh, where is he? So just this character would solve that.
okay.
I do wonder if you could play with this earlier being in the scene as they look at the damage of the car and then cutting back to it when he sees the wheels. Or you could literally just have this sort of shot just a little bit wider where the wheels show and then maybe the sign could be somewhere. I don't know. I think it's not hugely important, but if you want to experiment with it, this is probably the best shot to put somewhere, replacing one of these shots with a shot like this. So this would serve the purpose of the over the shoulder shot, whereas they could just be looking at it like this, you know what I mean? Looking at the damage. So that solves the issue without having to create a whole new shot. Anywho,
Sweet.
that's the yeah.
All right, thanks.
No problem. Here. So again, I read this without this, and overall, all this makes sense. The only thing is here, the perspective is really hard to tell because it's like I guess it's intentionally really breaking perspective and well, no, not breaking perspective. This character is literally vertical, horizontal in the sky. I think there might be a more clear way to make this clear. What that could look like is having the character like fall down because like, the boat's far in the distance. Like what? Like that, right? And they're like, "Oh, my ski broke." This is a broken ski. Because right now, looking at this, it's sort of like it takes the thing with a beat board or any story beat is that you want it to read right away. You want it to like be clear off the bat. And right now, we're looking at it, we're like, wait, where is he existing? Where is this character existing? And I guess there could be a wave coming up, but I think we might want to tame down the extremeness of this in comparison to the scene we've set. But aside from that, I'd say the rest is pretty good. because yeah, I can understand this um without reading the prompt. I think it's great. We can push the water like this.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I was also wondering,
Mhm.
the tail I made slightly bigger so that he could surf on it. Is that too off model?
Shoot, I haven't seen the model. Actually, I remember that the model was about one third, like about the same length as him, right? Was that true that the tail was about the same length as him?
Might be a tad bit smaller, but I think so.
A bit smaller, maybe like a two-thirds the size of him. Um, hmm. I would say that you would probably want to stick on model because it would still work the same. The story doesn't break if his tail is slightly smaller. So,
Alright.
so yeah, even if the t tail was slightly smaller, it reads. It reads as like, oh. Um, and in this case, you can break perspective a little bit. Off the bat, it doesn't look like the model. I think this, speaking of model, this snout might be a little long though. Um,
It's very long in the
yeah.
model.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
Um,
ridiculous actually.
looking at and this the on model is just their way of saying make sure it's readable. So it's not a huge deal if it's slightly different, as long as the animation team would still understand what's going on.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Okay.
I think everything else is pretty great. If there's a way you can have this pose read without blocking his face, that would be nice.
Okay.
Um, just moving his somehow, you could have him pointing this, like this. Oh, yeah, maybe this silhouette wise would be
Oh, that's
strong.
sick.
Yeah, like that, like my tail. Just because we don't like blocking the face with any actions.
Okay.
Um, if you could tilt the camera slightly and have the otter be like in frame as well, just to maintain. Oh, that's that's the otter. Just to maintain the relationship we're looking at, just so the audience at a glance knows exactly where we've gone. But
Okay.
that's sort of your choice. This is great. Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Okay, we now have character design. Okay, so everything about this character design is pretty nice. The only thing is that the rotation of it, everything's good, except his hand just changes like 30 degrees at the end. So this hand would actually, so what this is this hand is profile to your pose. Like it's exactly on the side of your body, right? So when it's on the side of the body, it would once again, you'd see it'd be like this at most, right? So it'd be like that, but that's it. Everything else, pretty great. Um, so we can cheat stuff in character design. We're making character designs. We're not necessarily following exactly the models. So it would look more appealing in an animation for the character's nose to stick out more, just so the audience can know where where they're seeing this character at. So just sticking the nose out like that would do a lot. Yep, that's all I'd say. So here, person who submitted this had a problem with the arm, and I understand because it's not really in line with. I understand it's trying to be chill, but you want to enforce that through the body language as well. Otherwise, this sort of looks like they're hiding like a knife behind their back and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" Like we want to make sure that it feels like they're chilling, right? I think that's what they're trying to do, right? They're relaxing. They're like, "Yo." So what I do is probably right now it's like as twisted as an arm can go. So it looks very like strenuous. So we want to have it more chill. We want to have it more like relaxed. So we could do that by just having it cup to the back of the head, right? Like that. And on top of that, we can, I think we need to enforce the body language a little bit more of the chill vibes. So we can be like, yeah. This gives the character more character too, just by having You see how this confidence exudes a little bit? And then this, in the front view, we'd have to adjust it. It's very important to have this silhouette, right? You want negative space between the arm and the body for the viewer to be able to understand at a glance what's going on. And that's the danger with having a complicated character is we can't just have beware tiny little areas where there's like holes in your silhouette. You want your silhouette to be very clear so that the audience at a glance can understand what's going on. So bigger silhouette gaps here too, right? You need this can be the danger with having a complicated character is you got to balance it throughout, right? If possible, I'd say just you will save yourself a lot of hassle in terms of the pose and in terms of moving the arms around if you just made this character two arms. See, we could just take away the arms and then be pretty much fine. You see, this is just as cool of a character, and you save yourself from the silhouette issues and the arm issues. You literally just be like, you know what, the arm doesn't need to be here, and but it's up to you. It's up to you. The way I approach the portfolio is largely like, um, I know we can have attachment to our characters, but I'm like, if it's easier if I make a boring character that is gonna get a higher chance, I'll just get a higher chance. I'll make a boring character that has a higher chance of succeeding. In this case, I think a character with only two arms would have a higher chance of doing well because a character with four arms is really hard to make appealing without complicating. It's just a difficult task overall. But this is another example where three-quarter, we could just have the snout poke out. Aside from that, I like it. This mechanic or aviator character. Yeah, pretty nice. So, person who submitted this asked if it was too boring or like too basic. I think this is great. I think there's a lot of character. I don't think it's too boring at all. I like the gesture. This is something that we don't see that we always want to push in our characters is the body is another mechanism for storytelling. And when we have these sort of um, tilts, it says a lot about the character's personality. So we want to include that where we can. And I think you're doing a good job here. I like this. I like the proportions. I like the way you're simplifying the forms. Oh, I don't have much to say about this. This is pretty great. And yeah, you're just making sure that the feet stay on their side. You've got yeah, this is good. This is really nice.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, this is nice. One thing I would say is we need to make sure that the rotation of this, see how it sort of stays the same at every angle? It's like parallel in each angle when we have to make sure it's like it would rotate like just like the character would, right? So how would we think of that rotation? So one thing I think would make this easier is if we sort of just had had it on its back. That would make it easier to rotate because it follows the line of the shoulder. It would be exactly perpendicular to the shoulder angle. So this would be the shoulder, right? And it would just everywhere the shoulder goes, it would follow, right? In this case, it's sort of at an awkward angle here. So yeah, I'd say we'd want to move it. It would make the whole thing easier. But if you want to keep it as it is, how would we rotate it? Well, here, so straight on, this is the character holding it straight on from an overhead view. This is the floor plane. Straight on, it's sort of going sideways. And you'd want to think, okay, if the character is this way and it's going sideways, and the character is this way, turn, it would be going this way. And you see the angles changed from here to here. So the next one, it would be like this, right? And the next one, it would be like this. And then this one, it would be like this, right? We have to make sure that the rotation follows the character. And the fish would be dangling back here. Fish should be dangling back here. Fish should be dangling on the side here. And fish is here, right? Ah, the pug. Pug is nice. I think this could do with some. I like the appeal, and I really like the character here. You said you struggled with the back view and the side view, and I think it's because you're you're losing some of the shape, and I'll say form, the form you had here. So the easy way to think of this pug's form would be to just be like a beanbag, right? A beanbag shape. And then on top of the center of this beanbag, you pull out a sphere, a semi-sphere mass, right? Like a half circle, right? Yeah, so that would mean here, right? Here you have that continuing, and you have that mass, and the snout comes out of it, right? But here, your mouth goes into your skull. So I'd say if you look at like a hog, you'd want to have it come out, right? Because that way you could have it be an indicator of the three-quarter view like this, right? That could be your three-quarter. And your back view, you have a back view face, but it's really a three-quarter face we're trying to go for. So you'd want to do something like that. You see the ears need to stay on a three-quarter line. Same thing here. Like that. And yeah, I think that's probably what you were struggling with, is just making the face feel like it uh it rotates in form. And what would happen on the side view too, when we see something in front view and it's wide, in the side view it should be smaller, right? Should be thinner. So that's what I'd do. And I'd have the mouth like that. Yeah. Okay, so this I really like. The only thing I would say is that you're going the wrong way with this tilt. You see how these glasses tilt up and the mouth tilts up, and this sort of, and the ears tilt up. The head doesn't, but you have a perspective that's going up, which is saying that the horizon line is up here. It's sort of implying we're looking down on the character. When the thing is, we want the horizon line down here. We want the horizon line to be around the shoulder to head height. So what I do is just flip it. We want to be going slightly down. If not even, we'd go down. What that means is the front ear slightly bigger than the back ear, right? Always slightly bigger than the back ear. Because imagine you're the camera right at this level. The thing that's closer to you would be bigger. The thing that's further would be smaller, right? So that's where that would be the case, right? And I wouldn't exaggerate it too much because we're not trying to, ideally, we don't have distortion at all because a character turnaround in animation, you don't have distortion on the character as it turns because the idea is that we're seeing them from so far away that as they turn, it will make a difference. So I would just say even these out if you can. But yeah. Yeah, so keeping the glasses straight and only adjusting them based on proportion and not scale, right? So that'd be like glasses turning would still fit the vertical space the same way. They would just proportionally, each lens would take on a different size as it rotates. See? So yeah, good job rotating the hands. Make sure so these hands, no, okay, so this hand slightly up, this hand slightly up, this hand slightly up. Good, you do a good job at rotating the nuance there. I would say you would probably want to indicate some form here because these look relatively flat. So if you can, finding a way to separate. And what you could do is give this character shoes just so you can show that you know where it's wrapping, right? Right. So by doing this, you get to show that it's wrapping, right? Showing that you know where the front plane is, where the bottom plane is. Because right now it's just this flat contour. We don't have a lot of information. You see how much information it shows when you can separate the lines from each other. Shows that you have the sense of the space down. Oh, on that note, something like here, you sort of have separated the head from the neck. If you want to make it feel like one piece, you have it all exist as one, and that'll do a lot for the believability of the head as one unit, right? And especially something like this, you have the neck lead under and overlap, right? By doing that, you're really establishing that the neck fits into the head, right? Little areas like that go a long way. You could do that in your fabric folds too, like this, right? Showing areas of these overlaps really help to clarify the volume for the viewer. So here, this is one of those things where we need to focus on what the purpose of the layout is. Once again, the layout is the background to complement the action. But if this is the focal point, we don't want to keep it in the bottom right corner because then what's all this room for, right? In the show, we would just zoom in like this. We just zoom into this because if this is the action we got to look at, we just do this. So we want to ideally put this in a place that is where the viewer, well, where the space complements this, right? So I'd take that and I'd go, where can this go? You'd ideally, what if we did this and then we'll redesign the space around that? So what if we just moved, so for example, let's say this is the focal point. We can erase this. We don't want to though. Have the table still here, but just push it a little bit back in space, right? And we can have the vase moved up so that it is now a foreground element. And to fill this space, what we could do is, we could put like a dresser here, maybe, right? And put it with whatever. But you see, we can just redesign the space, keep everything else relatively similar. But now you see how the focal point is a lot more clear. There's no point having a subject off screen. Another thing is, this is a rule, this is like the field guide. You don't want any important elements outside of this square. Because in animation, it's like, imagine this is a dead zone. You don't want anything close to the edge. No one's going to look at the edge. If there's an important piece of information, it shouldn't be near the edge of the screen. The point of the frame is that it directs the viewer's attention to the center of it. So, yeah, do you recommend the focal point being in the center? I recommend the focal point being either in the center or on one of the lines of rule of third lines. So have the focal point on this edge, or in between the two of them. You don't want a focal point, and we'll get to some later down the line. Here, perfect, good question. Okay, so here, so you see like the focal point's in the center here, but when you have a focal point in the center, what you need to do is balance the frame, and a focal point in the center means it's like the only focus. So the issue here, and this is a very beautiful composition, very great use of form and depth. The only issue is that we have another important element guiding to the focal point. But you see what happens is that we create this imbalance. When the focal point's near the center, and there's another thing on the side, there's an imbalance. So what you would do in this situation is adjust it to become like this would be the new frame. And you see now how we have a classic rule of thirds composition, right? But as to not take away the good work done on this side, what we would do to then keep this a center focused focal point, right? We just need to add another balancing element on this side. So I would do continue this motif of this bamboo, like this grassy thing, and sort of it's like a curtain, right? So continue it on the other side. So now this feels centered again. Because right now you just have the mass, the the value is only on one side, the dark mass is on this side. But what that's done for the composition is make it, this is light, this is dark. But now there's like, what's the point of this whole side? This is the focus. So what's the point of this whole side? So to counteract that feeling of something being missing, we just fill it in again, right? Imagine this is filled in. Yeah. Sorry if my drawings are super shoddy and you're just being filled with lines. Hope it makes sense. But yeah, fill that in. So here, this is really nice. I don't really have much to say. Yeah, this is great. Well thought through story. Nice foreground element. Good broom. Pretty dope. Here, okay, we have a story of the platypus who loses a coin. OMG, thank you so much. I feel so nice. Awesome. Sweet. Platypus swims happily with the coin, crashes into a beaver dam, dropping his coin by accident. Uh, so I think here we, okay, here it feels like we're going down in perspective, right? Sinking in. If that's the intention, then it's good. Just crashes into beaver dam. So he crashes into a beaver dam. I don't feel, it looks like he's going away, like sinking into something, but it doesn't seem like that's the intent. It looks like he's crashing, like he's ramming into something that's in his way, like this. Like, I think what you could do, the only thing is it feels a little, the action of the coin flying away, it feels like he threw the coin based on the way it's going away from him. So I wonder if there's a way we can frame it to show he loses the coin. Um, hmm. Yeah, there just might be, but it looks like he threw it right now because it's like high in the air. Uh, there might be a way to show him parting with the coin by accident. He could crash into a rock, like he could hit a rock, like that's the rock. He'd be like, ah, and then the coin drifts off without him or something. He'd be like, ah. I'm not sure, but I wonder if we could reframe this in a way that more naturally feels like he lets go of the coin. And then here, I think we can have just the look, just the face of like show his face. That's my point. Show his face, be like, ooh, ooh. Yeah, show his face. So glad I don't have to draw this platypus. Yeah, just show his face. And then the conclusion is nice. Um, so here's once again one of those stories that it's like it's too grand of a story. It's not a beat, it's not a storyboard, it's a beat board because every beat is like every plot is a development. It would take like 30 seconds each instead of the story being told over 30 seconds. So what I'd say is take a sequence, take a four-piece sequence, or pick pick any four of these panels and make them your 12 panel story. Because right now this is a beat board that's three times bigger. So the character sees the violinist, watches them on the TV, shows their brother. The brother bikes to a store, buys stuff. It's like a montage sequence, but that's not the point of these storyboards. So you'd want to dial it down a bit. Now, this is still good, and you can include it in your personal, and you could, as the story, you could include it. It reads. So I didn't have to read this to understand the story, but I do think it's generally a risk to do a story of this scale. What I would say is yeah, just start maybe somewhere here and show the suspense of knocking on the door, surprising them, walking up, Daisy opening the gift, and then surprised, right? We can just be a lot more sort of like these. So I think these two stories are a good example of the scale we're looking for. This story happens over 30 seconds and this story happens over 5 minutes. They're very short stories, whereas some of the longer storyboards, this happens over like a day or 2 hours, and then this one happens over a night. We want shorter scale stories. So those were the stories, but I had a few more storyboards that were submitted at the last minute, so not the last minute, last half hour, but I'll get through these and then I will call it a day. And I'll probably go through Discord and just do some quick, just for anybody who didn't see them or didn't have any here. So platypus, so I don't, so yeah, I'm gonna not look at these first, and then I'm gonna see if I get the story without it. So they're on a nice picnic, nice, nice carrot cake. Okay, the hat flies. Half flies off. I think we can emphasize we can make the hat smaller because the hat right now looks like, it we don't know if it's right in front of the camera or just really big or we're not sure. So we could make it sort of like this, right? Just further away. Feel like it's flying upward. This makes sense. Um, Although this transition might be breaking the 180-degree rule. It's like we have the camera on this side, and the camera's here. I guess I can still see where, as long as the viewer isn't confused with the orientation, breaks the cake. Yeah, I like the story. I think it's pretty strong. I'd say you could probably have the hat take up less of the frame, like this. Because the idea is that this angle is the motion that's happening. So we're going to push it. We can have platypus reach out like this and the hat on this just to fill the frame in a more organic way. Right? Like that. And then flat. Yeah. And then I'd say we can probably. Oh, he grabs the hat. That's good. Separate the cake splatter from the hat a little bit. So have his hand out like this and the hat like this. Right? Just so we can clearly by the silhouette tell that they're separate. So here, one of these examples is like we need to pare down our story to, no problem. We want to pare down our story to just the essentials. So part of platypus assembling a puzzle, that's the story. We can start here. We don't need platypus at the story getting a puzzle. There's no point. When someone's playing with a puzzle, we assume that they like that's all we need to know about a puzzle, right? So platypus is assembling a puzzle is the starting point. Platypus realizes there's a piece missing. In frustration, he throws away the piece. Instead of showing him get the puzzle, I think the frame we really need is him looking for the piece, right? That's what the story rests on. So instead, have this and then have a frustrated, huh? Like really frustrated him looking for the piece, right? He's looking around like, where's the piece? You don't need to do a zoomed in face. You probably don't want to. You probably want like frustration of him looking and being like, where is this piece? Looking around. More of a medium shot. And this is a puzzle, maybe. Anyway, he's looking around. Then he throws it away, and that's good. I wonder if we can frame this in a way that's we kind of want to make sure that the audience sees the puzzle piece on his tail. So we might want to frame the like, what if we framed it very low. And this is an example of where we can use a drastic camera angle because we have to, it's drastic, man. These are drastic means. So we could have something like, he's like, he tosses the puzzle, right? Like, tosses the puzzle. Let's say this is platypus. And then the puzzle piece is on his, right? So this is where a drastic camera angle is actually necessary, right? But you see how this is clearly more attention grabbing than where we're really relying on the viewer to see this. So Platypus blocks his ex-girlfriend. So here's another thing. It's like we don't need we don't need to see why he's motivated to go to the gym. Um, just wanting to get buff is good enough as an idea. But also, remember what I said about visual stuff. Is this going to be in the show? We don't want to rely on visual emoticons or emojis or words to tell us what's happening in the story. We want to come up with a real viewable thing. But this is unnecessary just for the purpose of the story. This is enough. Viewer sees jacked dude, wants to be, hey, we know what that's like. Um, yeah, starts working out. After progressing with workout, gets new girl. Yeah, gets jacked. Then we need a conclusion. Um, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to blocks his ex-girlfriend, you could just have Platypus is like, he's sad and girlfriendless while there's jacked guys walking around with jacked platypus. Jacked platypus is walking around with platypus girlfriends. Like, Okay, so they're like he's sad because he doesn't have a girlfriend, and he's like, oh, poor old unjacked me. Right, there we go. So yeah, jacked platypus, unjacked him. He has an idea, and he's like, ooh, if I yeah, me too. I want to see Jack Platypus in a feature-length film. And he can be like, ooh, he has an idea, like, oh. So I don't think we need to show the muscular Jack Platypus, another muscly guy, because here we establish that he wants a girlfriend, but he doesn't, like the obstacle's clear. So we could just show him working out, maybe 2 frames of him developing the workout and then getting jacked and then getting a girlfriend. So we've just made the conflict more clear and we've solved the second, like we've combined them, making the first scene long. Yeah, I think it would be helpful. So yeah, in both of these cases, it's not that these scenes, um, we only have 4 panels and we only have 4 panels, so we have to make sure every one of them is crucial to the story, right? So, yeah, this is great. Context, we have the amusement park going up, focal points clear. The cocky, I like the confident pose. Gives him the ring, clear target, throws it, lands it. I think this is a good story structure. I think it's a good gag. I do think we want to frame it a little bit more. So we could just do a couple things to the frame it just a little bit more appealingly, as they would like more cinematically, I'd say. So for example, there's no reason we can't just have platypus bigger, right? It's like that. Um, Here we might just want to have this character smaller, like that, right? Just makes things a bit more dynamic and makes them fit into frame a little bit better. For example, here, okay, here, I think we'd want to move him more in the line of like that. Make him jump through this. So in here, we'd want to move platypus more in frame. And like we said, there's a safe zone we don't want to breach. here. Imagine that this is all important information needs to be within these boundaries. And you don't want them just touching. You want to give space around it. So you see just by moving platypus here, we give a little bit more space. Here too, if we could crop in a little bit more, it'll just give us a bit more breathing room. So you could just like that, and just a little bit more. But haven't changed any shots. Yep.
Oh, I was wondering if you think there's enough shot types and if the third shot with the really high angle one works and if it reads as a close up for the rhino.
Oh, a close up for the rhino. It doesn't read. It works, I think. I think it works. I think it reads as a close up on the. It looks like an overhead shot where we're sort of seeing the 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 platypus and the rhino and the rings closest to the camera. And I think that works. The ring being here, and we'd imagine that the direction is like this, going down. So I don't necessarily think like about shot variety. I think you have enough shot variety, but what comes before shot variety is always like the point of the shot. And I think by telling the story naturally, you've gotten that shot variety. You have first shot usually is a wide shot because it's establishing the location. You've got that. Second shot is like a medium shot. You've got that. Third shot is an overhead because you have an action to cover. Does that well. And fourth shot, you have another medium. I think that's good. The thing is, it serves your story. So before picking your shots, like you don't want to pick a shot because it's different but doesn't serve your story. Such proximity, but also high angle. Yeah, you have a great use of the high angle here too. So I think you got it. I think
Thank
it
you so much.
reads. No problem, no problem. Um, then the last one we have today is this one, Storyboard. Let's see. Okay, so character side sees a rock guitar, hugs their bear goodbye, puts it in a box of a garage sale. Kid sells the bear and goes to a store, buys the guitar, and gets the guitar they want. But they had to trade it for a bear. Let's see. So the story reads, the kid really wants the guitar and decides to trade it. All of these shots. So establishing shot, clear where we are, clear what the focus is here, clear what the conflict is here, decides to put it in there. Yeah, there's a yard sale, kids walking by. Yeah, I mean, this all reads pretty well. The story is pretty clear. And the kid gets a guitar. Okay, with subject looking at poster like that, or how should we try to show rather than tell? Yeah, that's something. It so a lot of this all works, though it's not. Yeah, it's never like I say, it's never ideal for the poster to be the mechanism for the story. The character just desire is just like, oh, it's shown on a piece of paper. But the thing is, changing that would there's not really a substitute. Maybe a broken guitar or yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not
Maybe
sure.
I'm just gonna jump in here. Just like one
Please.
way I could maybe imagine is like showing them at a concert or like seeing a guitarist that just somehow raking it in. Um, like maybe they're busking and they're just making like they're just
Yeah.
bills and bills and bills in a guitar case, maybe,
Yeah,
but
I think there's
it's
definitely
tricky.
ways to better show the desire, but that's what I'm like, it would change the story too. Like there's no individual
Yeah.
frame we could change here to make all of this work and still keep, right? Like in this context, in the room, the only alternative would be to show a broken guitar, and then so yeah. Let me see. Can I make her look at a video or photo of some playing guitar? So that's the thing, but it's still a photo. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the best storytelling mechanism at the end of the day. It's when you show them watching someone, it's sort of the same thing. If they watch someone playing guitar, it's, I mean, what we'd be getting at is the same as the earlier story, like watching the storytell here, watching the violinist play and then watching the violin. It's the same. They're just different ways of showing, not telling, right? So if possible, I would say that the way I see it is like in terms of your story capacity, in terms of the show don't tell, you're limiting anything you could show visually just by the story you're trying to tell. So at the limit right now, you're like at the capacity, you are capped at the ability to tell the story as best as it could be by the nature of your story, which is that the character sees a flyer of something instead of engaging. So yeah, what Garth said about being on a stage watching somebody play guitar and then wanting a guitar, that makes a lot of sense because it's showing the actual experience of being in that environment and then wanting it. This is just another, like, posters and advertisements are like clearly mechanisms to show incentive. So it's tough. As the story is, so we could say, okay, well, we'll take that hit. Everything else reads. Um, and I would say, depending on the amount of time you have, if you finish your portfolio and you can rework this, try, you can you it would be good to, but if you rely the story on this mechanism, the rest of the story still does read. It reads fine. Like I understand everything else going on. I understand the character's desire. So so yeah, I just don't, there's no individual way to change this frame without changing the whole story. So but yeah, and to finish up, I'm probably just gonna check real quick. Maybe just quick 5 minutes on the rest of the storyboards and just see if I can see what else is new. Puzzle one. Only this one's really new. Okay, Platypus has been on a losing streak. Close out his last bill. So something I see, and I don't know if they're on the call. Thank you. I'll definitely try to come up with something about a story if I have time. Yes. Nice, nice. Um, so with stories like these, I don't know if this person's on the call, but um, sorry, I was wondering if my board booked it's the ring toss one. Oh, okay. Ring toss one. 180-degree rule. Let's see. So you have your camera on Slack. And then, no, I don't think it breaks the 180-degree rule. No, not at all. Your character stays on the left side of screen the whole time, so it's pretty like your characters stay on their half of the screen throughout. It's your character reads pretty nicely. Your story reads nicely. The conflict is clear. The gag is good. It's pretty solid. I think you can just go ahead and line it.
Thank you so much.
No problem. I'd move this out of the way though. I wouldn't have it. I'd have this element completely in its own space. I'd have the foreground elements frame it, but not block it. Like that. But yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll just finish up with this one. Something, beware, when you guys write like platypus is on a losing streak, this is where the writing can be dangerous. It's like what someone might do is write uh platypus is on a losing streak and not show it, or you could only tell if you read it, which is dangerous. So here it's like how you'd maybe want to show it is, well, you'd think like what shows someone losing, and maybe you'd show a pile up of bills or tickets or something. You want to really make sure that it's clear that an audience could show it. And then you might realize, oh, the story I'm telling doesn't let me show, don't not tell, right? So that's where you go, okay, maybe I have to change my story. But Paul pulls out his last coin. So yeah, for example, last coin. We don't know that it's the last coin. We have to see that it's the last coin, right? Size pulling out in his last coin, not expecting to win much to come from it. So a shot like this, I think again, if we're not reading the text, we don't have the evidence that this is happening. Platypus sighs while putting in his last coin, not expecting much to come from it. I can't tell that from just the frame. So you want to make sure that everything you're although I don't think Platypus is learning good gambling habits. But yeah, guys, that's most of the reviews I've got today. Hopefully that was helpful. If you guys have any other questions before we part or anything to talk about, please feel free to ask. If any of the work I previously reviewed, you have any follow-up questions, please, now is the time. Otherwise, it was lovely reviewing your work. And I wish everybody luck on the portfolio. Tyler, I pulled in everything until like 6:40. It took a while to get these all, so wasn't able to. Unfortunately, if I missed some of your guys's. So thank you.
We're gonna do another one
Okay.
next month, folks. Don't worry. This is our
Awesome.
January free review. We're gonna do it every month of portfolio season this year, next year, and hopefully continuing. So yeah, definitely. I imagine the February one's gonna be busy. Maybe we'll pull in
Yeah.
multiple tutors. I don't know. We'll see. But
Oh yeah, it's
thanks
gonna
so
be
much,
busy.
Tieran. That was
No
great.
problem. No problem. Thank you for having me. I
Awesome.
do some of you guys I have on mentorship, or I see you at the ROM group. So, I mean, you guys probably don't have time right now to go to the museums on Saturdays, but they will be continuing until March. So, if you are in Oakville or Sheridan, please come to the ROM group and learn to sketch animals and stuff.
Sweet. Okay. Awesome. This is going
All
to be posted
right.
to YouTube, folks. So if you missed anything or if you want to refer back to it, then yeah, it'll be available.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
See you guys again.
See ya.